to welcome Dan, who's going to talk about the allure of the last chance to cheat.
Great. Hi, folks. I'm Daniel Effron. For those who don't know me, I'm an assistant professor in the OB subject area. I teach the Managing Organizational Behavior course. Have I had any of you as students? I don't think so. I don't recognize anyone. Well, maybe I will in the coming term. I'm a social psychologist by training. That means that I run psychology experiments to understand how different situations affect people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And in my research, I'm particularly interested in understanding what kinds of situations lead people to be more or less likely to be dishonest. And today I'll talk about just a small piece of that research. So organizations often want to prevent their employees or their customers from lying, cheating, and stealing. But organizations have limited resources to monitor people. You can't watch folks all the time. So if we had some idea of when people are more likely to lie, cheat, and steal, we could deploy those resources a little bit more effectively. People often anticipate correctly that they have multiple opportunities to get away with dishonesty. And sometimes they anticipate that the window of opportunity to get away with cheating is going to close at some point. So maybe using an example, it's a bit too close to home. If you have a bunch of exams at the end of the year, you know how many exams you're going to have, and that may provide you a fixed number of opportunities to cheat on the exams. Maybe the boss is out of town, giving employees an opportunity to sneak out of work a little bit early without telling anyone. But you know the boss is only going to be away for a week, so that only gives you 5 chances to do that. Contractors on fixed-term contracts may have a limited number of opportunities to overbill clients for work done, like a certain number of invoices they submit, a certain amount of time before the contract gets over. So in situations like this, oops, I gave away my punchline too soon. In situations like this, how are people going to behave? We know from a lot of laboratory research that if you give people some opportunities to get away with dishonesty, to sort of lie for personal gain, the average person will take some of those opportunities, but not all of them. This is because most people are torn between wanting to maximize their self-interest on the one hand, but wanting to feel like a good person and be honest on the other hand. Okay? So if people have a series of opportunities to get away with cheating, we know they're not going to cheat all the time, but when are they going to cheat? As I gave away a moment ago, my colleagues and I suspected that they would be more likely to cheat at the very end of this series. This is what we refer to as the cheat at the end effect. Now, why would people be more likely to seize a very last opportunity to cheat compared with earlier opportunities? Well, people are more likely to cheat to get something they really want compared to something they only kind of want. Right? What do people want? They want what they can't have. We know from a lot of research in marketing and social psychology that when resources or opportunities become scarce, people want them more. So we know this from advertising, right? You hear these phrases, for a limited time only, and get yours now while supplies last. Right? This makes us want things more. So if you've had a number of opportunities for personal gain, to cheat for personal gain, and all of a sudden those opportunities are dwindling, your window of opportunity is closing, by definition, the opportunities to cheat have become scarce. They should be more attractive. And you might think to yourself, if I pass up this last opportunity to get what I want, I'm really going to kick myself later. I'm really going to feel regret. So when you get to the last chance to cheat, its pull may be so strong that you may be more willing to cheat to get what you want. I've run a bunch of laboratory studies examining this cheat at the end effect, and I'll tell you about 2 of them today. So for the first study, we recruited a bunch of participants in an online marketplace. They signed up to do this study, and we told them this was a coin flipping study, and its purpose was to study psychokinesis, the ability to control objects with your mind. This is not what we're actually studying. This is the cover story. We tell them that as part of this study, they should find a coin, and they're going to flip it several times in the privacy of their own home. There's no way we can observe them. We say, try to influence the outcome of the coin with your mind. Try to get it to land on heads. Now, to be sure that you're properly motivated, we'll pay you a small amount every time it lands on heads, and we'll pay you nothing every time it lands on tails. Okay? We told people, look, we personally don't believe in psychokinesis. We're actually trying to find evidence that it's not real. So it's really important that you don't cheat. Like, we know you could tell us that you just flipped heads and we would pay you anyway, but that would seriously compromise the research process, so don't do it. And then people had some of these, this matrix where they indicated whether they flipped heads or tails. Now, it's impossible to tell if people cheated, right? Because they're doing this in the privacy of their own home. We can't observe them. But you can tell if cheating occurred in the aggregate. So if everyone was being honest, 50% of people should say I flipped heads. If some people cheated, it should be more than 50%. Okay? So we examined the percentage of people reporting that they flipped heads on each flip. Now, we had people do this task under one of three different conditions. We told about a third of participants that they would do 20 of these coin flips. We told another third that they would only do 10. And we told others that the number of flips they would complete would be randomly determined by a computer. Now, what we're interested in is how many people report getting the winning outcome on the 10th flip. You'll notice that only in one of these conditions is the 10th flip the very last one. So we're holding constant that everyone in each condition does at least 10 flips, but only in this condition do they think 10 is the very last one. So let's look at the percentage of people reporting flipping heads on the 10th flip. So remember, 50% means that people are being honest. First, let's look at people who thought they would do 20 flips and people who thought that they weren't sure how many flips they would do. You'll see some people cheated. It's not a huge amount. I mean, if anything, this is an interesting result, right? That not everyone is just reporting heads all the time. But what about people who thought that flip number 10 would be their very last flip? You see a substantial increase in cheating there. Now, we can also look at the number of people who cheated on the first 9 flips. So just to make sure that we're not increasing cheating overall, we see that it's statistically equivalent across those 3 groups. And another way of understanding the data is to say people were only more likely to cheat on the 10th flip than on their previous flips when they thought that flip number 10 was the last one. Right? You don't see that if you compare the blue bars or the red bars. We've run this coin flip study a bunch of times. We've given over 2,000 people almost 24,000 opportunities to cheat. And we find we have to do a little bit of math to correct for the fact that half the people will flip heads by chance. But when you do that math, you find that the odds of cheating are almost 3 times higher at the end of the series than earlier. Now, one limitation of this kind of work is that in the real world, people don't go about trying to influence the outcome of coins with their minds. So we wanted to do another study that had a little bit clearer of a real-world analog. So we're still doing a laboratory study to keep a lot of control over what's going on. But this is a study that simulates when people have opportunities to overbill for work. The reason we did this study is because I often hire research assistants to help me with my work. And I tell them, go off and do this task, and then tell me how long it took, and then I'll pay you for it. And they come back and they say, it took 5 hours. And I'm like, really? I kind of think you only took 2, but I have no way of proving it. So what we did for this study is we hired London residents as temporary research assistants. And we gave them some tasks to do that I typically hire people to do. We gave them a bunch of essays that participants in my previous study had written. And these research assistants had to go through and provide ratings of the different essays. It's sort of a boring task, but something that often needs to be done. After each essay, they said how long they took. And we said, look, you're doing this over the internet. We're not meeting you face to face. We have no way of knowing how long you took, but we're counting on you to be honest. Please accurately report how long you took. Now, we lied to them a little bit because we're actually timing how long they take on the tasks. So we can tell if they're overbilling us by subtracting the amount of time they actually took from the amount of time they told us they took. So we had people rate the essays under one of 2 different conditions. We told half of the people they would do 7 essays. The other half, we said they would do 10 essays. Now you'll notice that this is the only condition in which essay number 7 is the last one. So we're guessing that people are going to overbill us more on the 7th essay when they think it's last than when they don't think it's last. All right, so some more data. This is the number of seconds that people overbilled us for their work. When people expected that they would do 7 essays, they overbilled us more for the 7th essay than for the 10th one. And we can look at, that's a 42% increase. We can also look at how much people overbilled us for the first 6 essays they did. And we can see this is not a statistically meaningful difference. And another way to understand the results is to say, people only overbilled us more for the 7th essay than for the previous 6 when they thought that the 7th essay was the last one, and not when they didn't. Yeah? So the punchline from all this is that people are more likely to cheat when it's their last chance to do so. And I think these results have some important implications for how organizations can go about preventing cheating. So sometimes organizations might change a policy in such a way that it makes it more difficult for people to get away with lying, cheating, or stealing. Maybe they're going to look at expense reports a little bit more carefully, or something like that. If you're going to do that, don't tell people that you're going to do that until you've implemented it. If people know that this is the last fiscal year when expense reports aren't going to be looked at very carefully, they may feel like, oh, this is my last chance to exaggerate how much I spent on business expenses and so forth. Sometimes it's not always possible, though, to hide the fact that people's window of opportunity for cheating is closing. And in those cases, it's useful to monitor, audit, or intervene when chances for dishonesty are dwindling. So professors like me might be advised to check assignments a little bit more carefully towards the end of a term. Organizations should verify expense reports just before a budget is due to expire, and so forth. So when people struggle to balance their motivation to maximize their self-interest with their motivation to feel like a good person, the self-interest motive is more likely to win out at the very end. Thanks. Any questions? Yeah, please. I have not found gender differences in this paradigm. We've run it a lot. At some point, I stopped looking for them. I just kind of looked in the first few studies, and it didn't pop up. So in my studies, I haven't found that. Yeah.
But in MOB, I'm sorry to jump in.
Yeah.
In MOB, I think we studied that golden ball game show thing. Do you remember that?
Oh,
where
yeah.
it did show a difference in men
Sure.
cheat earlier and women cheat later.
So yeah.
Partners later. And my guess was that because we cheated because they cheated first.
It's interesting. So I'd want to look at the data on that a little more specifically. But the golden ball thing is a prisoner's dilemma, right?
Yeah. And
so often that's it's not quite the same as cheating. It's more framed as cooperating versus defecting. And there's a lot of research on the prisoner's dilemma showing that if you change the labels of whether you call it like cooperating or defecting versus option A versus option B, people can behave differently. And I'm just like making this up, but one hypothesis is that if you call it cooperation versus defection, that sort of cues into certain gender stereotypes and changes the way men and women might think about it. But if you called it option A, option B, maybe you wouldn't. Just a guess. Yeah. Any other questions?
my question is,
Yeah.
what is it about the last moment? Like, are people really thinking during the entire other options? Are they doubting, should I cheat or not? Or is that something just specific of that last moment that
Yeah.
they feel that pressure, or they just question it more?
Yeah. So I think what happens is if you're, say, doing this coin flip task, every time you flip the coin and make a response, you're like, I didn't get the outcome I wanted. I'm kind of tempted to cheat. Maybe I'll do it on this one. Then on others, you say, no, I'm not going to cheat. And I think as you sort of weigh those competing forces, that I really want to cheat, it just feels stronger when you get to the last one. So I don't know how consciously people are kind of going back and forth between each of these forces on each trial, on each cheating opportunity. But I do think they are weighing those forces, and I think it's just so much more tempting to cheat when they get to the last one.
And is then cheating more often when they feel that the gain is bigger?
Yeah, so people definitely will cheat more for more money, right? So if you got nothing out of cheating, you probably wouldn't cheat. And if you got $1 million instead of 10 pence, you'd probably be more likely to cheat. But I think that people are less sensitive to the raw amounts than you might think. And we can talk about that offline a little bit. But.
Could you define cheat, and these people, it's not about the gender, but some kind
Yeah.
of individuality type,
Yeah.
well, religion, upbringing, or something else.
Yeah. So there's certainly interesting research on that. As a social psychologist, I study how differences in situations affect most people on average, as opposed to how differences in individuals affect behavior. But I can throw out some stuff about individual differences in cheating. People whose personalities are more creative. Well, what do you think? People who are more creative, do they cheat more or do they cheat less?
More.
Yeah, so people who are more creative cheat more because first of all, they have more creative ways of rationalizing it, so they don't feel bad about it. And second of all, they're better able to recognize opportunities for cheating that other people haven't noticed. So.
As a social psychologist, and well, for example, in the group, do you think that people are more likely to cheat when they can be covered up by other people?
Yeah.
For example, if one is cheating, they're like, oh, this person is cheating, so I can cheat as well.
Yeah, so people are really good at justifying their own behavior. They're even better at justifying the behavior of a group. If it's clear that you're cheating for yourself, you're going to feel a little bit bad if you cheat. But if you convince yourself that, well, I'm cheating for to increase profits at my company or on behalf of my clients, or if it's someone else that's benefiting, you kind of let yourself off the hook a little bit more, and you're more likely to cheat. Not you personally. One is more likely to. Yeah.
Do you think that when cheating is tied strictly to the fact that it's compensation based as far as money value rather than non-monetary compensation? Because I know I was working for a professor and we were doing some research where we were trying to do when one group of people were compensated with money and another were compensated with gifts or items. And we found that people were more likely to steal items if they were compensated in items, and they wouldn't steal cash that was left on the table, for example.
Oh, that's interesting.
Whereas people who were paid the cash, they would take the cash that was on the table rather than take the items that were on the table as well.
Ah, interesting. I'd love to hear more about that study. I've only run these studies with with small monetary amounts, but it would be interesting to. I mean, people also cheat for sort of social recognition. There was a guy in my field about 5 years ago who it turned out that he had been completely fabricating his data since his dissertation for like 15 years. And you can understand that like at the beginning of his career, it's hard to find jobs, you sort of want to get that grant money. But at some point, he got tenure, he got a job for life. The incentive to cheat was sort of taken away, and he kept doing it. And I think it was because he wanted the social recognition of being a big shot professor. And so people do cheat for non-monetary incentives. I don't know how that would play out in this paradigm, but yeah.
And have one more question, yeah?
I was thinking, it was really interesting seeing your experiments. They were quite kind of discrete activities. How do you think behavior might change from what you mentioned, more complex scenarios like in corporate world? Do you think there's a difference?
Yeah, well, so give me an example of a less discrete activity.
Well, I mean, they were, I want to say discrete, they were like repeatable, like flipping a coin 10 times.
Yep.
But, for example, you mentioned the expense inlay. The scenarios where someone might expense bill aren't necessarily going to be, they're going to do it every month of the year. So in these kind of more complex scenarios, like doing it at the end of the year might actually be the worst time to do it. And an individual might recognize that already, and do you think behavior might change?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So one direction I'm interested in taking this research in is looking at sort of psychological endpoints as opposed to kind of structural endpoints. So in this case, you had 10 chances to cheat and then the study was over. Like with expense reports, if you're going to be working for the organization for a while, it's unclear when the end is, maybe right before you quit. But I think things like the end of the fiscal year, the end of the week, the end of the month, right after you've landed a big account, things like this, they carve up time for us. And these sort of psychological markers, I suspect, can make people kind of tap into this rule of thumb like, oh, it's my last chance, even though it's not actually their last chance. I don't have any data on that, but I hope to. Maybe if I talk in one of these in the future, I'll have an answer for you. Great. Thanks for your attention.